All right, thanks everyone for joining. Let's go ahead and get started. We have a lot to cover. I know a few people actually already asked a question about the listen-only mode. We will keep it in listen-only mode. I'll kind of go over that, but I'll let you know how you can ask questions, so we'll make sure that all your questions get answered. My name is John Bailey. I'm with NetMotion Wireless, and today we're going to talk about our new product, which enables you to troubleshoot your wireless cellular network. Okay, so let's get started. So our agenda for today, we have a lot of things to cover, so I'm going to go kind of quickly on different parts, but I'm going to give you a little background on how we came up with this product and talk about managing your data networks today. Introduce the product called Locality. Then we'll go into a demo and spend the majority of the webinar on the demo itself, so I'll actually be showing you real data. The demo's with live data. It's not some sort of canned demo. Kind of summarize with the benefits of Locality. It should make sense at that point, and then talk about next steps. Now, we always have quite a few people on these webinars, so instead of opening the phone lines, because that can unfortunately get a little out of hand, if you have a question, use the question control panel. I'll try to answer the questions real time. If I don't get to them real time, I do get the questions in a question log, and I will follow up with you directly. So rest assured, we'll make sure your questions get answered. So again, if you have any questions, fire them off. If I don't get to them right then, I'll try to get to them at the end, and/or I'll follow up with you directly. Okay? So let's get started. So we've been working on this product for a number of years, and the product released just about exactly a year ago. How we came up with this product is, if you think about your network today, so if you think here on the left, your corporate network, you've got these, critical applications you have deployed, large database applications, mission critical type apps. You've got obviously users on that network. You probably have some sort of wireless networks there. You might have remote offices with some sort of site-to-site VPN tunnel between those offices. And today, there are a lot of tools that exist to really monitor the performance of those networks. There's many products out there, some even hosted, some as appliances that, will really give you a view of that network and how well those applications are performing. In some cases, you may even have an SLA with some outside vendor, in terms of that performance. The problem that we've found is, as you take those users that need to access those same types of applications, and they move out into the field across the public cellular network, we found that really it's dark. You really have no view into now, how well are those applications performing now? What sort of issues are those users having once they leave, my controlled environment? And we continually got the same questions, or heard the same questions over and over again. One of them obviously is, where are my users having coverage issues? You might have a lot of sort of intangible data where users may or may not complain about certain locations they go and say their route, or when they go and work in a particular location that they seem to have coverage issues there, they seem to get dropped. But you don't really have that tangible data to know where that's happening unless maybe you do some sort of drive along with them. The other question that comes up is, what about next generation technology? As you invest in, say, 3G and 4G type networks, you get a whole bunch of new air cards. Are you actually getting that type of technology? Or is it that the location they're in, or there's no towers there for them, or it's so saturated they can't negotiate that type of technology? But just to have some real data to understand, what is really happening out there. And that can also drive, maybe picking the right device for a particular user. So for example, if you have multiple carriers and in a particular location, maybe you can't negotiate a 4G connection because there just doesn't happen to be enough tower strength there for one carrier, but for another you do, and you have a user that needs to push a lot of data, you can make sure you deploy the right card for that user. The other question is really just, how well are all these devices performing? Once these devices leave your environment and they're out there in the field, they're out there in strange coverage areas, they're being used throughout the day, are they really being used effectively? Are they having problems? Are some devices not being used at all? Could you find a lot of devices that, especially as you get more and more cards, that maybe there's some that haven't been used in the last 6 months, and could you repurpose those somewhere else, or could you cancel those plans? Is there an easy way to see that? It might sort of sound easy on paper that you should be able to just take your bill and see, wow, I haven't had any usage on these cards. But as you get more and more cards out there, some are embedded, some are external, you have more carriers that you're using, an easy way to see sort of, are they being all used effectively, and are there some that I can maybe cancel? And these questions, this is really what brought us to create this product. The sole purpose of locality is to give you visibility into your public cellular deployment, okay? So let's kind of talk about what it is literally. So if you look at this, this picture here, on the left we've got your clients, these are your devices in the field, and on the right we basically have a server. What locality is there's a piece of client code that would reside on the endpoints. Okay, it's a small footprint, it's a small client you would install. The client has no user interaction, so they don't even need to know it's there. It just runs in the background. And what it does is every 5 seconds, it takes a snapshot of things happening on the device in regard to the cellular deployment. So it will look at the user logged into the device. It'll look at what air card is being used. It'll pull information off the card, such as the card's number, the IMEI number. It'll also look at what carrier it's connected with. It'll look at things such as signal strength and other signal quality type characteristics to really understand, what is the quality of the connection right then at that time. It'll also grab GPS information. So if GPS is available, whether that's from the card itself or from some external GPS device, it'll grab all that information every 5 seconds. Every 30 minutes, it takes that small piece of data, zips it up, sends it up to the locality server, and the locality server's purpose is to take all this data and create these rich maps and reports. The locality server is software, so it's something that you would own, something you would install on your own server. The nice thing is locality is a separate product from mobility, so if you have our VPN, our mobile VPN deployed today, this is an entirely separate product, so it's not required that you have our mobile VPN, although if you do, there's some additional reports you can get. So, but the nice thing is, since it's not required, even if you have a mixed deployment, you could have 500 users that are running our VPN client and locality, and maybe another 500 that are just running locality. All 1,000 of them you're going to be able to get all of these different reports for. There's just a few additional ones that I'll show you that you'll get because of having mobility. Okay? So let me jump into the product. Again, as I mentioned in the very beginning, especially for those that might have joined a little bit late, if you have questions, use the question bar on the right, and I will definitely get to those questions directly if I can. If not, I will follow up with you after the call. Okay, assuming I can log in here. So I also mentioned at the beginning, this is real data. So these are actually our users. These are our employees. If you look, you'll see this is sort of a map of the U.S. and Canada. Just like our mobility product, locality is completely managed through a web console. So if you look across the top, I've got these different tabs. Now, within each tab, you can sort of see I'm on network performance. You can see there's multiple tabs underneath there. There's a lot of reports built into this product. Because we only have, really 45 minutes to an hour on this call, I'm going to highlight sort of the main ones, but just know that under each tab there's some additional reports that are along those same characteristics, but I won't cover those today, but we can cover with you directly if it makes sense, or you can look at them when you look at the product yourself. So let's just look across these tabs here. So system, that's just information about the system. Not really going to go into that right now. That's more maintenance. Inventory, I'll spend some time on inventory management. One of the great things when you think about it, if you have this locality client on all of your devices, and again, every 5 seconds it's grabbing information about that card, it's tracking the inventory of those devices for you. So for example, if you have USB cards, everybody knows those can sort of find their own legs, and someone might loan them to somebody else, or maybe they're getting used in a device that you didn't actually purpose it for originally. As soon as that card is used, within 5 seconds, that data is going to be reported around where that card is, where it was last used, and a bunch of information that you can use then to sort of track that card. And I'll cover that because I think that's a pretty powerful part of the product. Dropped connections, that's the ability to do some troubleshooting. We'll look at that a little bit. Network usage, that's really kind of visibility into your own deployment. So, how is my network being used? What cards have not been used in a long time? What cards are being used too much? So I can kind of get a nice, clean view graphically of my different carrier deployments, my different cards out there, and make some intelligent decisions around, do I need to renegotiate some plans here? Do I need to cancel some plans? How are those cards being used? And then network performance. Network performance really is that, how well is my deployment performing? And we'll start there. So we've got a couple of tabs underneath there. We're going to start with coverage map. So coverage map, if you look, I've got this address bar. I can pretty much type in any kind of address here. So I'm going to put in a Seattle location. And what it's going to do is it's going to zoom in where I've typed in there, and it's going to show me where I have data. So again, if you think about, and I know through GoToMeeting it takes a minute for this to paint, but if you think about, what you might have today as tools for getting, coverage information, that's really something like you doing your own drive testing. But again, if you deploy locality and it's collecting a sample every 5 seconds from every device out there, that drive testing is happening just by users doing their jobs. So where I see these colors, this just means that's where I have data. So where, like over at Mercer Street here, right in the middle, where it's blank, I just don't have users that work in that area. But you can see at the legend here, I've got data from AT&T and Verizon. So I have AT&T and Verizon users out there. I can click on a particular square and get a little more detailed information. I'll show you a different view there. But one of the nice things here is you can see the number of samples. So in this case, that particular square, which is roughly about 300 square feet in terms of GPS, I've got 28 samples there. So that could be 28 different devices went through there, or 10 different folks went through there and spent a little time there, maybe at a light, or were stopped there for a period of time. But when you deploy this in your own environment, within a very short amount of time, you can get a lot of data, because this is aggregated data. So if you think about doing, a drive test, that's potentially sort of one sample. That's you driving through the intersection. Maybe you do it several times a day. You can completely get rid of that, because this is just your users going about their day to do their jobs, and the samples are being collected automatically. So let me change it from carrier display to signal strength. And this is where information gets a little more interesting. This is where, if you look at the left, we're looking at AT&T right now. We're sort of looking at average signal strength. And so this is the idea of, really green is good and red is bad. So we can see for the most part, we've got pretty good signal coverage. What's interesting about this is the signal strength that I'm receiving at the device. So this isn't necessarily a coverage map for AT&T. They may have, in some of these locations, where it's yellow, they may have great coverage there. This is what I'm actually receiving. So we've even had some customers that have deployed this to help troubleshoot issues they were having, where the carrier said, gosh, we have great coverage there. I don't understand why you're having problems. And once they deployed locality, they could see where they were receiving a terrible signal, and it turned out to be a problem with their antenna. So it wasn't an issue with the carrier at all. It was a problem directly with their antenna, and they replaced the antenna with a different one. Problem went away. So it was a great tool to use for them to really find out what's happening. Now again, one of the things I can do is I can just click on a particular square, and I can get more detailed information. In this case, I've got 7 samples at that square. I can see the different technology types that are being negotiated, and some information about the average signal strength there. I can easily compare carriers. So right now I'm looking at AT&T. I just click a checkbox, and I'm looking at Verizon. Again, the locations may not be exactly the same, because it's going to depend on where my users go. But if I say I'm a single carrier today, and maybe I'm having some problem spots, say I'm Verizon, and maybe I want to see if AT&T is better, I could just take 10 or so AT&T cards, deploy those with my users, let them work for a week or so, then log in and look at my map of that new information. And so it's a quick and easy way for me to compare cards, compare carriers with just a few clicks. I know a question came in regard to device support. I'm actually going to touch on that a little bit later, so don't worry, I'll get to your question, but just so you know, I did see it. So the other thing I can look is I can change from signal strength to technology type. Now, this becomes important, again, especially as we move more into the 4G LTE world around, I've invested in this new technology, and am I actually getting that where my users need to work? So it could be that there's not enough antennas there. It could be saturation, or maybe there's too much noise. But is there a way for me to actually see that I have a lot of data I need to pump through this network? Am I getting the right type of technology with this particular device, with this particular carrier? And that kind of information you probably don't have today. So what I can do here, if you look at my legend here with the technology detail, it's showing 3G and 2.5G. I can just uncheck the 3G, and I can see that there are a few spots where it's actually I'm dropping down to a lower technology type. That could be most likely in this case maybe some sort of interference from maybe a building, but that's important for me to know, especially if I have a heavy application that needs to be used, and it needs to be used in those locations. So maybe that's where I deploy a different type of device, or I need to let the user know, okay, when you work in this part of town, you're probably not going to get real-time data. You're going to have to upload the data later, or change a little bit of their workflow. But it's just great that I can see this kind of information, and it's a great view. Again, this is where I could easily compare different devices, compare different carriers out there. Okay. So again, this is the network coverage map. This is an aggregated view of all of my users, and basically this data is just being sent back to the server every 30 minutes. So every 5 seconds takes a snapshot, every 30 minutes sends back to the server, and it crunches this data. So you're going to have a pretty rich report, especially if you're, say, a 7x24 shop. This is just data from about 10 or 15 of our users driving to and from work. Now, the other question that typically comes up is, what about troubleshooting a specific device? So this is great where I can see sort of what my coverage looks like, but what about a device that's having problems in the field? So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to jump over to dropped connections. So dropped connections for us basically means a device was connected and then disconnected. So it could have disconnected off the network because the user shut down their computer, or they actually clicked disconnect in the connection manager, or they were disconnected without them wanting to be disconnected. So it just means that they were connected onto the network and then disconnected. So we have a lot of things showing on the screen here. If you look at this graph, this basically scatter graph, this is showing signal strength against drops per hour. So each dot just represents a piece of data. And so I have a lot of data that is less than, say, 5 drops per hour. That, really to me is not that interesting. That just means, some devices probably connected, and maybe they did get disconnected once unintentionally, but most likely they shut down the machine. But I have a couple of anomalies out here where I have, something 20 to 25 drops per hour. That's information that is interesting to me. That looks to me like a problem in the field or a problem with a device. One of the nice things with locality is all of these different reports are very interactive. So I can just left select those 2 data points, and it's going to filter on just that information. So if I look at the top here, I have a lot of information right away. I know how many drops happen in an hour. I know the actual device. So this is the computer device. I know the user that was logged onto that computer. This is great if you have, say, shared devices. It's helpful to know that, maybe the device, is it the device having problems, or is that user that was logged onto the device having problems? I even know the phone number of the air card. So this is the air card. I know the manufacturer and even the model of that card. So I have a lot of information about that device and the card that was being used on the time that it dropped. I also know exactly the date and time. So on 8/23 at 1 o'clock, this thing dropped off the network 24 times in an hour. So now what I can do is I can go and zero in on that information. So if I go back, I know the device name. I can go to network performance, and I can now go to my device map. And here's where I can filter on a particular device. So I'll just put in my device name, and I know that the day in question is August 23rd. So now I can go to August 23rd, and now what it's going to do is it's going to zoom in on exactly where that device was on that day and show the route that device took. So what's great about this is, the toughest part about troubleshooting, cellular connections is troubleshooting it after the fact. If someone's calling you and they're having a problem right then and there, you can say something like, okay, how many bars do you have? What's your signal strength right now? Where are you? But if they call you and say, gosh, yesterday I had problems all day long, where exactly were they having problems? What was happening? You might talk to the carrier. Were other people having problems? But you don't have like an easy sort of way to see that information. This here is showing me, this is the device right here that I can grab with my mouse, and it's showing me the exact route that user took. What it shows on here is where there's an X, that's a drop, that's a disconnect, and then a checkbox is a reconnect. So you can see all throughout this route, there were a lot of disconnects and reconnects. And what I'm looking at here in the color scheme is basically signal strength. So if I just kind of zoom in a little bit here, and I'll just put the device right here, if you look at the lower left, I can get all kinds of information about the details of what was happening at that moment. So in this case, I know, again, it's the user, and that's the phone number of the card. I know at 1:26, they were on Verizon with a 3G connection, and at that moment in time, they were disconnected. But a pretty good signal, not a bad signal. So I can see a lot of green here, and that kind of tells me that, maybe it's not the carrier in this situation. If I saw red throughout this whole drive, I would think, okay, wow, there's no signal out there. No wonder they were dropping. But I can see that it looks like the signal is pretty good, and so maybe this, again, is something with the antenna or with that particular card. What I can even do if I want is I can actually replay that drive. So there's this play button right in the middle here. I can hit that, and it's going to show the device moving through the route. And you can see at the lower left, as this information changes, as it goes through that route, you can see a lot of disconnects, then reconnect, then disconnect. I can pause it anywhere along that. I can zoom in to get more information, and I can move the device to find a particular location. Really, I have a lot of information that I can troubleshoot with. I can also change it to technology type. So in this case, maybe if I saw it flopping between two technologies, that might tell me something with an antenna could be happening, or maybe saturation. I see it's all blue, so blue in my scenario here means 3G, so that looks pretty good to me. But again, this is a way to troubleshoot a device. And as I mentioned, sort of an example, we've had customers use this exact map to determine that they had a bad antenna. They saw that they had a great signal but were continually dropping. And so that's where they found out that there was something about the antenna that it I think might have worked loose or some other issue, but it was really the reason why they were dropping off the network. Okay. So again, like I mentioned early on, there's many more reports here. Just for the sake of time, I'm not going to be able to cover those. But your network performance, coverage map, aggregated data, device map, looking at a specific device. Okay. So let's jump over to network usage. Now, one of the things that we're collecting, is, usage across the card. So this is not usage that you might use to sort of look at your bill, but this would be usage to kind of see what's happening with your deployment. This is a nice, easy way for you to determine cards that are being used too much, or maybe cards that are not being used at all. So you can see we've got multiple carriers here. I've got data from multiple carriers. Verizon obviously seems to be our big one. But again, the graphic is very interactive. Let's say, for example, I have a meeting coming up with my AT&T representative, and I would like to sort of educate myself about how's that deployment going. What exactly does that look like? I can just filter on AT&T, so I can left select this, and now my filter is AT&T. I can see a nice big view down here. Since the beginning of the year, I can see my usage has been, starting to climb, really kind of peaked in August, and then, again, we're kind of mid-September, so that data is a little irrelevant. But I can see my usage is going up. Okay, that's interesting information. If I go to the next tab, I can see what users are on that network. So I think this is a great report because, especially as you start deploying a lot of different cards out there, you might have users that are using different carriers, and again, sometimes you might order a card and it's from AT&T and you assign it to Bob, but then that card gets handed off to Jim and Jim's using it, or Bob returns it, you don't have a good inventory tracking possibly, and you use it, send it to another person. This is a way to show me who's actually really using this network. And I can see things like sort of who the power users are. So I can see these top users up here that they seem to be really doing a lot across this network. This, again, may be where I go talk to them and find out a little bit of information about their experience, or possibly I need to renegotiate their plan. If some users using it much more than others, that might be interesting information. The other thing I can see down at the bottom are users that are barely using it at all. So these users have cards, so they've at least used it at some point in time, but they're barely using it at all, and so maybe that's where I can go say, you know what, we need to cancel these plans, and I'll show you another report that we can look at for that. If I jump over to last used plans, I think this is a good report because this is going to show me those same devices and the last time they were used. So this is where I might say, I'm going to, any card that hasn't been used in the last 6 months, that plan's getting canceled. We need to save some money. We're paying, $50, $75 a month per card, and what do we have out there that we can cancel? One of the nice things here is I have this data in just a couple of clicks, but I can also right-click in here, and I can send this to Excel. And it'll easily, basically create that same report and open it up in Excel. And now that's the kind of report that I can basically take to, my carrier representative. Or maybe this is, I manage locality, and this is, my boss asking me for a detailed report of who's using our AT&T networks or who hasn't been using them in a long time. I can go here, and again, with a couple of clicks, I can right-click, run this quick report, and then I can take that to my carrier, and I can say, okay, these cards I want to cancel. And again, the nice thing is I know the phone number of the cards, and I even know the device that the cards were used in last. So I can say Chris's PC, the last time this card was used was on 8/20. I know exactly where to go to get that card, or I know who to talk to find out, what happened to that card and to cancel that plan. So again, nice information, very easy, just a few clicks. This is really to show you how your network's performing, okay? I mentioned in the beginning that our mobile VPN is not required for this product. They are two separate products. But again, if you have our mobile VPN, there's even some additional information you can get. So let's just say, as an example, I see I have this power user here, Juan, and I'm kind of wondering, well, that's really using a lot of data compared to everybody else. I want to find out more information about what has he been doing on that network. So I can click on him, and it'll now filter just on him. And I can see, if I look at this graph below, the month of August was a big spike for some reason. So one of the things we can do now is we can actually see what applications he ran across the cellular network. So now I can go to the Applications tab, and it's going to show me a view of the applications that he ran and some information about their usage. So this is the data that's being pulled from our mobile VPN product. So if you have mobile VPN today and you have our analytics module, you're probably familiar with looking at application usage. We're actually pulling this data from our analytics module, and we are showing specifically what the cellular data was. So we're actually mining that data and not showing just all data, but just cellular. And this is where I can look at things like, I see this application, TM Proxy. Maybe that's a strange application, or I see like Pandora or Spotify. And this would be where I might go to maybe back to my mobile VPN and create a policy to block that particular application. Okay? Quick question came in here. Okay, yeah, I will definitely cover that towards the end in terms of users and a little bit about pricing. Okay, so again, that's network usage. Mobile VPN is not required, but if you have it, great additional info. So let me jump to the last piece here, and that's really inventory management. Now, one of the things I do every time I go meet with a customer is I ask them, how do they track their devices in the field today? Okay, so if you have multiple devices, multiple cards, and you have multiple carriers, and again, even thinking of embedded devices, right? So you have some laptops or tough books that came with, say, a Gobi 2000. Now you order a new one, comes with a Gobi 3000. You know, just tracking what all you have in the field and who's using them. And I ask customers how they do that, and 9 times out of 10, it's an Excel spreadsheet. And it's an Excel spreadsheet that someone has to manage, and typically is managed at the beginning of the procurement of that device. So they basically are, you know, ordering the card. They put in this Excel spreadsheet, this card went to John Bailey. This is the carrier. This is maybe the IMEI number for the card. Ship that off, and then I use it for a while, and then maybe it gets handed off to somebody else, and that spreadsheet may or may not get updated. So the nice thing with locality, again, we're grabbing data every 5 seconds. And so every 5 seconds, we're taking a snapshot with a lot of information. I showed you some of the information we gather, but we even gather deeper information such as firmware. So let's just kind of take a look at this data. This is all of our different cards in the field. And just like all the other reports, I can right-click in here. I can send this to Excel. So there's my Excel spreadsheet. Really, this inventory report is coming to me from the client, so I didn't have to do anything to create this. Let's just say that maybe there's a problem with a particular card or a particular firmware. So what I can do is I can click this to say manufacturer, and maybe I know it happens to be a Qualcomm card. So I can click in there and I can look at, now I'm looking at just my Qualcomm cards. Okay? Maybe I know that it's this 5620. So I see this 5620, I can now click on that. And again, I've just gone deeper and deeper into a filter. And now what I have is I have all of my 5620s out there, and I even know what the firmware is on all these. So let's just say, as an example, I found out that there's this new firmware that's bad, and it happens to be this one. I can now click on that, and now I can find out not only the firmware and a lot of information about the card, but I even know the last device it was used in and the last time it was used. So in this case, I know this Qualcomm card was used, the last time it was used was on March 22nd. I even know the device it was used in, and let's say this is a bad firmware. I can now contact that user. I can pull that device, or I can upgrade the firmware, or do what I need to do. But again, this could be something where, just like before, I can right-click, send this to Excel. Maybe I give this information to IT, and they go track down this device. But I've got, in just a few clicks, I've been able to track down all the way down to the firmware of all of my devices in the field. Again, so if I clear this out, everything is very interactive. All of this is my inventory report. This is my inventory tracking of everything in the field. Now, a couple questions came in. One of them, in terms of the 5-second period, is that configurable? We looked at a lot of reasons why you would want to change that, and we tried it. We did a lot of testing around that. It is static at 5 seconds. So again, every 5 seconds takes the snapshot. Every 30 minutes sends that data up to the server. Okay. So just to quickly summarize here, inventory report, which we just went through. This is the tracking of all your devices in the field just by deploying the locality client. There's really nothing for you to do here. It just creates this report for you. Network performance. That was how is my cellular deployment actually performing? I have my coverage map where I could see my aggregated data across all of my devices, and I have my device map where I can zero in on a specific device to understand where it might have been having problems. Network usage, how is my usage happening? What is a view into my usage, and what are devices that haven't been used in a while? What carriers are being used more than others? And then dropped connections, again, that was a way to sort of troubleshoot devices in the field or see, are devices getting dropped off the network? Are they having a lot of issues? And then taking that information and going to the device map and zeroing in on where they were getting dropped off the network to find out what might be happening. One side note on this dropped connections report that I think is great is, in a lot of cases, if I clear out all this data, so I show you the full scatter graph, a lot of times users might not even be reporting these drops. So one of the things you can do as an admin here is, you can troubleshoot a device when they're calling you and telling you they're having problems. But this is a good place to sort of periodically go and look at, are a lot of devices dropping out there, especially maybe you've deployed a new card and you want to kind of see, is it having issues? And these users maybe aren't calling in and telling you that they're having problems, but you can go in here and you can look at the data yourself, and you can zoom in on these reports to see, gosh, what sort of drops are happening. I can even run a hardware report, which is this next tab, and I can see all of my devices. This is all of my different types of hardware in the field, and see which ones might be having sort of a trend of a lot of drops. Like I see in this case, this PC770 just happens to be one that's had some problems. So this is a great way as an admin, just sort of periodically and proactively look at issues and maybe stop them before that deployment gets rolled out even further, or replace those devices with newer ones, let's say. Okay? So let me jump back into presentation. Again, there's a lot to the product. Hopefully I covered the really main pieces. We'll kind of summarize here at the end. I think if you think about how you could use this product, obviously some of the things you can do is deploy the right equipment, in the beginning, knowing where a particular device might work better than another one, or a particular carrier might work better, but basing your deployment plan on actual data, not just on sort of intangible data or what you've heard. And again, reducing employee time, fixing the issues that employees might be having out there. I think for your support staff, it's kind of a no-brainer. I've talked to some customers that have literally done ride-alongs with users that continually have problems. And I just think about how much time that wastes. I mean, that's a full day of an employee that is focused on a single problem just because they have to go right along with that user and then manually record things like signal strength or where they're getting dropped. This is something where, again, you could just log into locality and you could just, look at it yourself. You could even figure out when they were getting dropped by the dropped connections, or you can ask the user, what day was it? It was Tuesday. I don't know where I was. Don't worry about it. I can find where you were, and go in and actually trace down to where they were having those problems and find out, is it a problem with the device? Did it happen to be a carrier issue? Is there poor coverage in that location? And then make a decision on that. I think for your bottom line, aside from the fact that you can really, really reduce your support costs, you could, possibly reduce some of your carrier expenses. Like I mentioned before, as you get a lot of these cards deployed, we even see this in our own company. It gets difficult to really track where the card is, who's using the card, when was the last time it was used, are these plans I can cancel, are these plans I can repurpose? Again, if I can see some visibility into the applications, maybe I can understand what apps people are really running across that network, and that might help me with usage. But, again, it can really help my bottom line by having a view into all of that. So a few last things, and then I'll go through the questions. I did want to cover just a few case studies here. To get started with the product, it's very easy to deploy. The server runs on 2008 R2. That can be a standalone server or a VM. It's a very, very simple installation. The client is, like I mentioned, a thin client. There's no user interaction that needs to happen. The one thing that is important is, we do try to support all of the cellular adapters that we sort of see out there today. But I do want to point out what you want to do is sort of go to our website, go to the locality tab, and you can see a requirements doc there. And it will show you the supported modems that we support today. We can pull GPS directly off the card if it's available, or we can even pull it off an external device. So if you do have an external device that supports a NEMA stream or tape, if it's a Trimble device, we support that. We also support even some trunk-mounted modems. So if right now we support Sierra. If it's a Sierra Alios modem, we fully support that. And then the last thing, like I mentioned, is you don't have to have our mobile VPN in order to have this product. They are two separate products. If you do, however, there's just some additional reports you can get. So in a mixed deployment, you'll see those reports for those with our mobile VPN, but those not running our mobile VPN, you just won't see those reports. But all the other mapping data, the inventory, the network usage, all of that will still be there. So, I mentioned we released this product just about almost exactly a year ago, and since that time we've got quite a few customers already. We've got a few case studies just to kind of point out in different types of verticals. Amica, a large customer of ours, they're a mobile VPN customer. They really like the fact that they could reduce their downtime for the mobile employees and also choose the best device. For them, these users are claims adjusters, so they're users going out and all day long they're going to all different locations, sort of looking at your accident and your vehicle and writing up a claim, and that's their application. And in some areas where they would go, they just didn't happen to have good coverage with a particular carrier, and so using locality, they were really able to map out their sort of world and understand, okay, we need to deploy this card for these users when they work in this part of the town, and so it really helped them to choose the right device, and it just gave them visibility into that deployment that they didn't have before. Another customer, Mesa, Arizona Police, they loved the ability to troubleshoot devices. So they really, I think they might have been one of the ones that actually had to do a ride-along to troubleshoot problems that they were having. They knew that there were certain roads that they had problems at, but they just didn't have real data to sort of see. And so they loved the ability that they could troubleshoot the dropped connections. They could determine if it was a network issue or is it a hardware issue. It's not always the carrier. So they were able to actually see this information. And then the fact that they could get these inventory reports, basically for free, that was sort of a side effect of the product itself, is, wow, we spend a lot of time tracking these devices. We don't have to spend that time doing it manually now. It's just coming to us in the inventory reports. Okay? So the last thing here, and then I'll start diving into the questions. I saw a few more came in. What's great about our company is we're very open to evals. So in terms of next steps, invite you to try out the product, and I can tell you, if you deploy it, say 15, 20 devices, within a week you're going to have a lot of information. So especially, again, if your device, if your users are driving around all day long or working in some location all day long, you're going to get a lot of rich information very fast. So we will help you with the installation. It is very simple, but we'll work with you on that. And we can even host the server if that's needed, at least for the eval. So contact us, sales@netmotionwireless.com, or you can contact me directly. I can point you in the right direction. But again, it's software-based, so it's very easy to have you try out the product. So again, thanks everyone for joining. I'm going to start going through the questions. This is my contact information if you want to reach out to me directly. But I'll hit these questions and stay on the line. So again, if you have additional questions, please use the question bar, and I'll be able to get to those. One of the questions that just came in was around OS support, which is a great question. So today the clients are all Windows-based. However, we're confident by the end of the year we will have an Android client. And then in terms of reaching out beyond Android, we are looking at other operating systems such as iOS. It's too early to say right now, but we're doing research in that front. But Android we are definitely looking at for the end of the year. A somewhat similar question came in around MiFi devices. We've really heard, gosh, it seems like in the last 6 to 9 months, a big demand for MiFi support. So we are absolutely looking into that, and we expect to have MiFi support sometime next year. So that is something we're also researching. There's a couple questions around pricing. I think for that, what we'll do is we'll just reach out to you directly. So again, thanks everyone. I will stay on the line. If you have a question, fire it off. If not, thank you for joining. think, Chris, you just asked a question. I think what you're asking is do we collect additional information such as tower location or any information about the tower so you could give that to the carrier. We don't do that today. What we do give you the ability, though, is to export out our maps. And so you could export out even a device map and then give them that information to sort of show where the device was. But we don't pull any tower information today, although it's something that we're kind of considering. Yeah, and just as a follow-up, I saw, Chris, you asked a more detailed question. So, yeah, the great question in terms of, and I'm just going to kind of reword it to make it simple in terms of things like throughput and sort of true performance. We are definitely looking into things like that to find out, is there a network problem? Is it, we might be getting a great signal, but maybe the network's so saturated that the throughput is bad, or there's some other back-end network backhaul, that's happening. That's something we're not doing today, but it is absolutely something we're looking into for the future. Great question, though. Thank you. And your last question, can we get a copy of the presentation? I'll make sure you do. I think everyone is automatically sent a copy. I'm not 100% sure, but if not, we'll make sure that you get a copy.